He was the undisputed king of the game, the strongest player in an invincible virtual world. But suddenly, the game was mysteriously shut down, and the city he lived in was transformed into a real-life battlefield amidst the chaos. His extraordinary skills became his only weapon for survival, and he transformed from a professional player into a legendary hero, facing an upside-down world with all his might and confidence. A bunch of pretty highly skilled players are seen inside the lava-filled Azure Land's hidden dungeon, nicknamed the Altar of the End, having completed about 99% of the virtual reality game. This select team of players knows they must tough things out, no matter what, to be the first guild of players ever to complete the game. In the first scene, a female fighter with blue holographic wings behind her back gets blown away by one of the lava boss demons residing in that dungeon. As she settles to catch her breath, enduring all the heat and chaos, the unidentified female fighter stops to wonder where he is. Since their leader hasn't arrived on the battle scene yet, the female fighters decide to buy him more time to show up. To do this, however, she analyzes the hidden lava boss's status and soon discovers that he only has an HP of 10.5% remaining. Unfortunately, before she's able to do anything, the boss monster unleashes a wide area flame attack after yapping some generic villain stuff. And the female fighter, who's already fatigued, accepts her fate. Luckily for her, just as the flames are about to engulf her, her teammate, who happens to be a defensive type, arrives in the nick of time and sets up a sanctuary shield that completely blocks all of the monster's flame attacks, protecting the female fighter from harm. Soon after evading the attack, the female fighter teases her savior, who happens to be a 4th-rank healer named Saito Meiji, and concludes that they have to hold out until their leader gets there and helps them defeat the monster. A few seconds later, after listening to Saito's advice, the female fighter, a 3rd-ranked battler, Hien Hitomi, returns to battle and rushes the demon monster with a barrage of punches, all of which do a great deal of damage to the monster's organic armor. As soon as the monster gets fully focused on attacking her, Hien retreats, dodging the monster's attacks, and gives the signal to their 5th-ranked seeker, Speedster, Nishi Roan, to swoop in and deal more damage to the monster from the back. Before long, Roan blows the monster's back several times, dealing damage as high as 8 million in just a few seconds, and runs away before the monster notices him. However, just when poor bro thinks he is out of harm's way, the lava monster catches up to him, disappointed by Roan's speed, and paralyzes the bozo with his deity, Slayer Flame attack, which also deals burn damage to him. Fortunately for Roan, the leader, aka the strongest man in the entire game world, 1st-ranked Commander Kamehata Shizuya, arrives just in time, putting the others' minds at peace, and blocks the monster's finishing blow. Shortly after blocking the attack, he apologizes for being late and blames the monster's brother and his forces for being too troublesome. Thereafter, he continues yapping some cocky shit about sending this monster to the underworld and blocks yet another sneak attack from the monster. With this, the lava monster engages him in a raw brawl of brute strength for a few minutes, and while Shizuya stands his ground, Saito, who heals him from behind, warns him never to stay too close to the monster for 3 seconds straight, or else, he'll be paralyzed for 1 second. Despite hearing the warning, Shizuya tells his team not to be scared because he has a plan that'll help them defeat this useless lava monster within 3 seconds, meaning they have a chance to get more than enough back within those 3 seconds. That being said, Shizuya launches a heavy attack on the flame monster's armor and ultimately ends up boring a hole in its chest. Not too long after, the lava monster dies, and the Mapo Tofu Guild, aka Shizuya's guild, finally defeats the lava boss, Ember, in record time. The moment the battle ended, both Saito and Hien were proud and shocked to see their boss insta-kill the monster like it was nothing. As the team gathers for some chit-chat before logging out, Saito condemns the final boss monster to be a farce, and Roan helps him understand that they'd have been cooked if Shizuya hadn't come to save them. Seconds later, Hien, Roan, and Shizuya all get into a friendly banter about their contributions in the battle, but Saito, on the other hand, pauses to analyze just how impressive Shizuya's combat ability and judgment are. According to Saito, Shizuya is the strongest player because he understands the game totally and can come up with insta-kill strategies, just based on his understanding of the game alone. While the hubbub continues, Shizuya gets a game notification on a holographic pop-up screen and checks it out, only to realize that he's finally unlocked all the achievements in the whole game. Before closing the window, another notification appears, informing him that he's unlocked a unique achievement he didn't know about. But before Shizuya can even make sense of it, the Azure Land automatic update system gets initiated, and logs them all out in 5 seconds without any announcement, promising new content as soon as the maintenance update is done. After complaining and condemning the game's management for being irresponsible, Shizuya and his whole team, alongside several other thousand players across the country, get logged out to touch grass. 5 days later, Shizuya boards a bullet train to get to another town and see some friends. While on the way, he watches the afternoon news and listens to the reporter talk about the sudden crash of the wildly popular and profitable online game, almost as if it never existed in the first place. Although frustrated that he wasn't able to see the special effect of the unique achievement before he was logged out, Shizuya still chills as he spends the next few minutes checking his friend's chat room. Moments later, the train gets near Hamamizu Station and informs its passengers to get ready to alight once it stops. With moments left till his journey ends, Shizuya engages in some friendly banter on the group chat and gets pissed while he's at it. Just then, one of the members uploads a link to the group and tells the others that the other guilds are declaring war on theirs. Though confused, Shizuya clicks the link, which leads to a video recording of an angry blonde, and then listens to the blonde girl blame the recent end of Azure Land's service on the Mapo Tofu Guild. Apparently, due to the high skill set of the fighters in the Mapo Tofu Guild, they were able to achieve a game completion rate of 101%, while the guild in second place, the Sandagu Guild, is just at a measly 33.9%. If anything, the angry blonde lady in the video demands that the leader of the Mapo Tofu Guild, Shizuya, explain this sooner so they can all understand what happens next. Shortly after watching the video, Shizuya sighs and moves on to think about what could have caused the sudden end of the game's services. Not too long after, a weird bluish portal opens up inside the train, confusing lots of people, including Shizuya, and before long, not only does the entire train get swallowed by a huge worm, but Shizuya's body also starts glowing heavily with blue glowing wires, all activating some sort of system. As the train suddenly brakes hard to a stop, gigantic monsters resembling characters from the game start stepping out of the portal, appearing in the real world, and give Shizuya an overwhelming sense of dread. Seconds after the first wave of monsters arrives from the portal, the people sitting very close to it appear confused and unsure of what to do at first, with many of them asking confusing questions, and others telling their partners to get out of their way. However, the moment the commander of the small monster army kills the first person on the train, the entire train car is thrown into pandemonium as a killing spree begins, all while the train continues getting swallowed by the otherworldly monster. As for Shizuya, who's clearly seen how dangerous the situation in the car is, he racks his negative IQ brain to try and figure out what and why he's having a strange feeling in his body. Before long, the monster army commander swings its weapon in his direction, and he dodges it. Recognizing the technique the commander just used, Shizuya keeps his wits about him to observe the monster a little bit more to confirm his suspicions. Moments later, to his dismay, the commander executes the leaping slash attack, something he's seen and used way too often in the game, Azure Land, but then Shizuya, upon recalling the correct way to evade such a powerful attack, advances and ultimately dodges the attack just as expected. As soon as Shizuya dodges the commander's next attack, he gets a real-life holographic status window with his name, level, title, and job. Since he's still a level 1 fighter, Bro runs for dear life, still racking his brains to try and figure out why he's seen that leaping slash technique so many times. Eventually, as time progresses, Shizuya gets to see the commander's details, just like he did, and soon realizes that the level 35 commander's specialty skill is the Leon slash skill, aka the exact skill he fights within the game. With all this new information, Shizuya knows he's yet to fully grasp what's going on. So, when he sees his chance, he busts himself out of the worm train, which is now at a full stop, and, from his observation, figures that the place is probably a shortcut to the worm dungeon. In other words, he's at the worm station, just like the one back in the game. Not too long after his escape, the commander also follows him out of the worm train. And so, Shizuya, upon spotting the commander, bails out, scared for his life due to the level difference between them. When the commander eventually catches up to him, Shizuya knows he's left with no other choice but to gamble. So, what does he do? Well, for starters, Bro turns off his real-world sensors and treats his first real-life battle with the Azure Land game commander like a game, forgetting that a single mistake could cost him his life. Shizuya enjoys himself in battles by running around, dodging the commander's attack, and baiting the brainless monster to the front of the worm train. Once he gets the commander in front of the worm train's mouth, Shizuya stops moving, bids the monster farewell, and watches the worm destroy the commander with its circular mouth and humongous, sharp teeth. After his victorious battle against the monster, Shizuya levels up 8 times, and yaps a little bit about terrain skills, which used to be trouble for him in the game, actually being effective for hunting high-level opponents. That being said, he hurriedly checks the Mapo Tofu Guild group chat on his phone to ensure his guild members are alright. Upon confirming that everyone's safe, Shizuya concludes that Rinkai City must have been the only city to have been taken by the game world. A few seconds later, 3 more monsters, each with levels around 30, approach Shizuya, and so he runs to protect himself for now. Just as he's about to leave that site, he notices a dropped item, which he discovers is the Shattered Commander's weapon from earlier, and analyzes it with his system. As soon as the stats and skills of that weapon pop up, Shizuya marvels over how ridiculous they are, and then wonders if it's seriously possible to get such an impressive treasure that early in the game. Soon after completing his analysis, Shizuya proceeds to fuse the weapon parts together so he can repair it, apparently the Hate Stalk skill, which gets activated once he repairs the weapon. Seeing as the commander's already dead, he does wonder why a monster's weapon is suddenly getting a tracking skill for players to retrieve items after they've been stolen. Just then, a King Shadow level 25 monster archer fires a magic arrow at him, and Shizuya, left with no other option, accepts the condition to survive first. Within seconds, he fuses the commander's weapon, unlocking several skills that come with wielding the weapon, including Leon Slash, Brave Flag, Commander, Omniscience, and Omnipotence skills. Albeit shocked to see that all the commander's skills have been unlocked, Shizuya activates Brave Flag, which increases his movement speed, defense, and maximum HP, and runs as fast as he can to shake the bastards off. Thereafter, he activates Leon Slash, a skill that can be activated up to 3 times for a triple jump, and uses it to clear a flight of stairs all at the same time. When the monsters chasing him get to the stairs, they fail to notice him hiding beside the staircase and run up the stairs to continue chasing after a ghost. Shortly after shaking them off, Shizuya gets out from his hiding place and checks the stats and skills of the commander's sword yet again, all of which happen to be much stronger than in the game. Despite knowing that he's safe, Shizuya, concerned about the Hate Stalk skill, decides to get out of the earthen cave he's trapped in before they do. Moments later, he gets to the subway's exit and finds an incredible number of game monsters swarming the space. Soon after, he spots a monster respawn point, which is something meant only for players, situated at a corner around the exit area, and gets really surprised that something peculiar to players would be given to monsters in a real-life scenario. Could it be that these monsters are infinitely respawning players meant to hunt humans? Could this be the new version of Azure Land? Well, for now, Shizuya doesn't know, but he does know that he'll be chased for the next 7 days by infinitely respawning monsters until the commander from earlier kills him and takes back his weapon. Considering the circumstances, he refuses to sit there and be killed. So, in a bid to survive and prove that he's the only one who understands the game better than anyone, Shizuya runs toward the underground region of the subway, hoping it'll lead to the C-rank worm station's dungeon called Farv's Heart. As he approaches the dungeon entrance, Shizuya reminds himself that the worms inside the dungeon don't have any connection to Farov's heart, which is something people rarely know, and can allow one to clear the dungeon without fighting the boss. While he continues yapping, the commander he defeated earlier respawns and tracks him down to the entrance. With no other option, Bro runs inside the dungeon and begins his level-up journey instantly. Once inside the worm dungeon, Shizuya runs as fast as he can to create some distance between himself and the worm monsters he's currently stepping on. Soon after doing that, he rushes towards the real cave entrance, with the little worm monsters chasing after him, and stops when he reaches a dead end. As the worms keep catching up to him, Shizuya gets desperate and searches the entire wall in front of him, hoping to find where the cave entrance is located. Luckily for him, Bro finds the cave entrance in the nick of time, situated around a spot high up on the wall, and uses Leon Slash's skill to jump toward it. Upon landing safely on the ledge of the cave entrance, Shizuya glances at the worms, roaming and hitting the wall on the ground beneath him for a second, and ultimately waltzes further into the cave. Before long, he arrives at a small pond with little droplets of water dripping from the cave ceiling inside it, and figures he's definitely arrived at the Tears of Farov. Seconds later, Shizuya extends his palm toward the water droplet and gains a plus 0.001 status point increase upon touching a single droplet of the water. Almost instantly, he gets notified that his trial of Farov has already begun, meaning Farov's power can flow into his body and must be uninterrupted, or else he'll be cursed by Farov himself. While referencing the game, Shizuya reminds himself that he just needs to sit under the water droplets for 3 days to get a 50-point status upgrade. And so, without any hesitation, he sits on the Tears of Farov's pond and begins meditating very slowly for the next few days. A few hours into his meditation, Shizuya gets hit with horrendous mental images of the scene in the train, where it all began, a scene where humans were getting killed left and right by the despicable monsters. For a moment, he racks his brains to figure out why he's seeing all these weird images. But very quickly, he realizes that his mental state is being debuffed, and this makes him understand the difference between the game and reality. Not too long after reliving the train scene, Shizuya gets hit with yet another horrible mental image. This time, he spots the ghastly skeleton ghosts of his Mappo Tofu guild members, Hien, Saito, and Ron, calling and accusing him of being late to something, and he reacts pretty violently to it. Soon after waking up from his meditation, Shizuya quickly understands how potent these mental attacks are, but despite all the mental damage being done, he calms himself down, having survived these tricks for 2 days, and decides to endure just one more day of the insufferable mental images. Just as he's about to return to his meditative state, something stabs his chest, and before long, he turns to see the commander he defeated earlier, holding the sword that just stabbed him. Before he can react, the commander kicks him to the ground, and Shizuya slowly starts losing consciousness. Over the next few seconds, Shizuya gives up on life as he concludes that a mere human with no chance of winning can't possibly defeat an immortal player, and continues muttering a few more things. However, just as he's about to take his final breath, Shizuya toughens up and refuses to give up just yet, not just because he's the strongest player, but because he's made a pact with himself to never lose to these bozos, no matter how low his level is. Even though bro knows he can't revive anymore, he still fights through the pain with sheer freaking willpower and rises like a warrior. Not too long after, he receives a notification telling him that he's been recognized by Farov and has become one of the worm species. At this point, Shizuya wakes up to the real world and realizes that his death just now was all just an illusion. Seconds later, he gets seriously dizzy and figures it's definitely because he's not eaten or drunk anything for 3 whole days. With this, he heads towards the cave entrance, and, while spotting the worms roaming the ground beneath him, figures that they shouldn't attack him since he's overcome the trial. Unfortunately for him, the moment he gets back on the ground, the dungeon boss worm, aka Big Daddy Worm, shows up and drops one weird egg-shaped material called worm essence from its mouth, rather than fight him. After a brief silence, Shizuya asks the worm if his health will be restored upon eating the essence, and Daddy Worm nods in approval. Having realized that he's been accepted as an ally, Shizuya eats some of the essence and returns to the subway exit. Getting there, he notices some low-level monster players roaming the place, and figures that the high-level players must have left by that time. So, since he's currently around level 25, which is 5 levels higher than the ones roaming around, Shizuya decides to fight them before the high-level players return. To do this, he activates Leon Slash and kills the first few enemies beside his hiding place. Thereafter, 2 enemies attack him with Stun Rush and Chase Arrow, but Shizuya evades all attacks using a Leon Slash Brave Run combo. At one point in his battle against the archers, he hides behind a pillar in the subway, but before he can catch his breath, thinking the enemy's vision is obstructed, one of the enemy slayers destroys the pillar from above and strikes his left shoulder. As he lies in a corner, backed up against a wall, Shizuya spots 3 enemies approaching him, with one of them carrying a portal stone, and realizes that he can't dodge the next attack. Fortunately, just as the monster's about to end him, Big Daddy Worm swoops in from the subway and attacks Shizuya's enemies with the smaller worms, saving him in the process. Thankful for their help, Shizuya takes out the other half of the worm essence and continues chomping on it to get his health restored. Once he spots the portal stone lying on the ground, he instructs the smaller worms to swallow the portal stone and move at high speed to crush all of them, so they don't escape easily. As the worm obeys his instructions, killing off the players, Shizuya gains tremendous XP and levels up 9 times. As for the monster's equipment, they all get crushed by the worm, which irritates him, but still, Shizuya knows he needs to retreat before they all revive. So he does just that, all while thinking of ways to stop them from coming back. Moments later, the emergency systems and choppers above ground issue evacuation orders for people under attack by the unidentified creatures to calmly retreat to the nearest shelter while they await military rescue in 2 days. Amid the evacuation proceedings and the chaos, 2 hooded fools infiltrate a supermarket and loot every convenience store supply they can, in preparation for the next few days they'll spend in hiding. Somewhere along the line, a blue-haired, nonchalant skinny girl on headphones strolls into the same convenience store, picks up a jar of mint condiment, and walks over to the counter to pay for her stuff. When nobody obviously shows up to attend to her, the girl gets a little disappointed and decides to check herself out. Outside, she continues raising her phone, hoping to find some cell signal so she can at least get an internet connection. But unfortunately, she gets none. Irritated, the skinny girl continues walking the chaotic streets filled with monsters, killing people left and right. Worried sick that she won't be able to find new songs to listen to, Just then, a hooded dude grabs her hand and hurriedly pulls her to a corner, making her drop everything she just bought. As the girl raises her voice to scold him for grabbing her like that, the guy shushes her up and waits for the giant monster parading that area to move past them. The moment the monster walks beside them, the hooded guy angrily asks the skinny girl why she didn't really see the monster they almost crashed into earlier, and the stupid girl nonchalantly tells him that it's because she was too absorbed in her phone. Around that same time, the monster, a level 25 shadow assassin type, hears them yap, and so it turns to observe them. The moment the hooded dude realizes that they've been spotted, he pushes the girl forward and makes a run for it. By this time, the monster attacks both of them, but then, the hooded guy, who's later revealed to be Shizuya, blocks the attack on time, shocking the nonchalant girl, and turns the tables with a counterattack. As the assassin monster falls back, it attacks Shizuya in a style he's very familiar with, and he struggles to keep up with it. While the battle rages on, the skinny girl, whom Shizuya is buying time for, takes her phone out and records a video of him fighting the assassin monster. As soon as he realizes she's not gone yet, he asks her why she's still there, and she tells him it's because she still needs to pick up the stuff she bought. To avoid wasting any time, Shizuya grabs her hand, warns her not to be insensitive about the situation, and ushers her to run away with him. Along the line, the skinny girl whispers something to him about the monsters not attacking, but Shizuya doesn't get to hear it. Moments later, she notices and asks him about the weird glowing markings on his hand, and Shizuya, who thinks about the powers he gained after picking up their weapons, just tells her that a lot happened. That being said, Shizuya and the skinny girl leave the city for the rural areas in search of a place. After climbing up a few stairs, the skinny girl asks him if this is his first time in Rinkai, judging by how much he knows the place, and Shizuya says he knows the way because he's got a map. Apparently, he just found out that the map of Rinkai City eerily matches the same map used to make out the beginner area in the game, Hound Village, which means that the developers might have modeled Hound Village after Rinkai City. Soon enough, the lady asks him why they're going to such an empty place, and, upon telling her why he's going there, Shizuya asks her why she's still following him. Pissed, the lady introduces herself as Kakone Ichijo and urges Shizuya to call her properly next time. As for the reason why she's following him, she tells him it's because it seemed fun, and Shizuya just ignores her till they walk through the invisible boundary at a spot to get to the hidden cave. Inside, Shizuya presses on, with his torch on, and does his best to keep Kokone quiet while he searches for whatever he's after. Eventually, they arrive at a spot inside the cave and find a male and a female soldier shouting orders at each other as they shoot desperately at some monsters pursuing them. After analyzing the monsters they're shooting at to be lower ranked and more thoughtless than the ones he fought at the station, Shizuya gets convinced that he can win against them, so he busts out of his hiding place, ignoring Kokone's warnings, and charges at the monsters head-on. By that time, the fighters notice Shizuya jumping into the fight and wonder if he's one of the monsters. The moment they realize that he's a human, Shizuya takes out the monster's healer first and waits for the tank to rush in without a healing source. Once the tank charges at him, Shizuya dodges his attack, waits for the soldiers to provide cover fire for him, and then prepares to take out the tank. Unfortunately, before that happens, the mage and the rest of the monsters vanish into thin air. When the soldiers try to figure out where the monsters are, Shizuya lets them know that they've retreated, so they don't waste their shots. The female soldier then asks Shizuya why he's looking the same as them, and Shizuya tells her to stop pointing her gun at him since he's already proven that he's not an enemy. Before things escalate, Kokone lets them know that Shizuya saved her back in town, and that makes him human. With this, the soldiers calm down and take both of them into their sanctuary, further inside the cave, to discuss. When they are all settled, the female soldier tells Shizuya and Kokone that she and her partner once came to the cave on a mission. However, suddenly, all communication was cut off, and they were chased by monsters until they escaped, along with the civilians they had rescued along the way. While Shizuya can understand how far they've come, he does let the lady know that the monsters probably won't let them go that easily. Based on the game's progression, all beginners absolutely must clear that cave dungeon, and both soldiers, the male and female ones he just met, must be the bosses of this dungeon, the twin demons. According to the game, the male one has a high magic attack and a wider range, but is slow, while the female one is fast and accurate but way less powerful. Soon enough, Shizuya gets a headache and promises Kokone, who's worried, that he's fine. With everything he's discovered so far, it's now a known fact that the game has descended into reality and that the human world has become a den of monsters. Those who appear suddenly as players, under the name of justice, can kill humanity, making this new Azure Lands version a twisted game of reality. A few hours after their arrival, a stronger wave of monsters triggers the cave alarm system as they approach the cave, and alerts both Shizuya, Kokon, and the two soldiers. Upon estimating how strong and tough the monsters are, Kokon suddenly gets up to go check them out, while both soldiers instantly begin telling everyone to abandon their luggage and hide in the back. Before long, the monsters arrive, and Shizuya, upon counting them, orders the soldiers to ensure the civilians are evacuated so they can fight them freely. Soon after, Shizuya spots a King Shadow archer shooting a lamp arrow into the ceiling to illuminate their path, and takes notes. As he charges toward the enemies, he instructs the soldiers to let him handle the ones in the rear of the enemy line, so that they can give him fire support. However, just as Shizuya nears the rear, the enemy mage shoots magic fireballs at him, and he dodges every single one of them. Right after escaping the mage, Shizuya faces the tank, who takes a defensive stance and uses the idiot's shield as support to leap above the tank's head, leaving the soldier duo to continue shooting high-caliber bullets at the tank to keep him busy. Seconds later, the mage tries to attack Shizuya again, but since these bozos are all beginners who can only use basic skills, Shizuya easily gets past the mage again, so he can finish things quickly. The moment he gets to the rear, the final monster, a level 25 King Shadow archer, fires a technical arrow shot at him, and Shizuya, while dodging the shot, figures that the archer must be the only monster to have some combat experience. As he contemplates what to do, the mage behind him bombs the area, and the male soldier, who's still up front, asks him if he's okay. In no time, Shizuya appears unscathed from the explosion, and assures the dude that he's doing pretty fine. That being said, Shizuya faces the annoying mage behind him and strikes him down. Unfortunately for him, though, the mage heals instantly from the damage, and the archer instantly gets in front to protect the healer. At this point, Shizuya knows it'd be hard to close the distance between them because of the archer, so, to get close, he decides he has no choice but to use the soldiers to force his way to the mage. The only issue he faces now is that this is real life, and they might die if even the slightest thing goes wrong. To avoid exposing them to such risk, Shizuya tries attacking the tank, but the tank pushes him away, and he crashes into the pile of debris behind. When he gets back up, wounded, Shizuya remembers when he used to sacrifice anyone on a whim in the game to turn the tide, but since he's now dealing with real living humans, he's not sure what to do. As he contemplates his next move, Kokon spots a little girl crying in the cave shelter and comforts her by giving her a lollipop. When the girl collects the sweet, Kokon pats her head and asks her if she knows where her mom and dad are. With tears in her eyes, the girl tells Kokon that her parents brought her to the cave and left her there, and Kokon assures her that things will be alright. Before long, the monsters overwhelm Shizuya and the soldiers to the point that they consider retreating after bombing a path, so they can survive for a few more days. But Shizuya refuses to give up just yet, as he uses the brave flag or run skill to increase his and his allies' movement speed and HP. Thereafter, he intentionally walks into another technical arrow shot, apologizing, and then deflects the arrow toward the male soldier's direction, hoping that he doesn't die from the hit. As the male soldier, Takudo, gets hit in the chest by the technical arrow, the crying little girl tells Kokon, while clinging to the lollipop, that Takudo secretly told her that there was something he hadn't told Akina, the female soldier. After hitting the first shot, Shizuya watches Takudo fall to the ground and apologizes to Takudo for sacrificing him. In the aftermath of the sacrifice, Shizuya talks about the special system in Azure Land, Chain, and explains that it's a power that binds two people to duties and responsibilities. If one of the chosen players is killed, then the other one goes berserk. Around the time Takudo collapses, Akina rushes over to check up on him, but Shizuya tells her to retreat now while they still have the chance. Instead of following Shizuya's orders, Akina just snaps, picks up a gun and a duffel bag of explosives, all while cursing those monsters, and throws the bag at the monsters. Once the explosives get to the enemy lines, she opens heavy fire on them and bombs them all, almost as if she were mad. Soon after bombing the enemies, Akina drops the gun, drops to her knees, and starts lamenting over the things Takudo did to become her partner. Then, in a fit of rage, she calls Takudo an idiot and starts bawling her eyes out in pain and sadness. About a minute later, Takudo coughs violently and jerks back awake, wondering what the hell just happened to him. Having seen Takudo wake up unscathed, Shizuya heaves a sigh of relief because his calculations were correct. Apparently, he'd used Brave Flag on himself and allies before the sacrifice to increase their HP and endurance so that the wound of the technical arrow won't be fatal. Shortly after waking up, Takudo stares at the bombed enemies and gets confused, trying to figure out if he was the one who defeated them. By that time, Akina punches him in the chest, calling him an idiot, and almost instantly, a diamond ring falls out of his breast pocket. Confused, Akina picks up the ring and asks Takuto for an explanation, and he tells her that he was going to give the ring, which ended up saving him, to her once they were safe. Without any hesitation, Akina hugs Takuto dearly and lets him know, with happy tears brimming in her eyes, that she's been waiting for him all this time. Soon enough, Kakone shows up to tell Shizuya that they're safe, but Shizuya asks if she understands what the situation is with those two. Having seen the love between the beginner twin demon bosses grow, Shizuya gets really happy to see that it's not a losing game after all, and can see a chance to win. Unfortunately, just 30 minutes later, despair returns again, and Shizuya finds himself facing yet another bigger enemy. Apparently, 30 minutes before Shizuya gets bathed in a pool of his people's blood, Takuto and Akina, the male and female soldiers, had gathered every survivor and advised them to exit the cave with them, so they could find another haven for them to reside in. Before getting the approval of the people, however, one idiot outrightly refused to follow them outside, because the initial reason they were evacuated there, with the soldiers, was that it was safer than outside. As such, going outside, where it's full of monsters, is suicide. As more people join the idiot's side, Akina tells them that the monsters already know that this is their current haven, so more of them will come, and it will be more dangerous for them to stay there. Additionally, Shizuya also tells them that he predicts that the monsters they just killed will revive and be much stronger than before. Having heard Shizuya's warning, the idiot leading the rebellion against the soldiers tells him that it's better they all just stay there and die, since the monsters can revive infinitely. Following this, he then asks Shizuya why they should trust his predictions, when he looks very much like those monsters, but just as Shizuya responds, the idiot proposes that he might be trying to stir up their anxiety to get them to go outside, and then kill them all. At this point, Kakone intervenes and trash talks the fool for saying such bad things about the person who saved their pathetic lives. When she begins saying more hurtful things about the fool, Takuto stops the argument and advises those who want to go outside to come with them. As for those who want to stay, he urges them to wait inside till they call for backup. That being said, Akina tells them all about the safe evacuation place at the airport, and then leaves the decision to anyone willing to join them. Before anyone chooses to leave, the little girl, Kokon, who was petting earlier, pulls Akina's shirt and assures her that she'll follow her and Takuto outside. Thereafter, the others slowly start joining Takuto and Akina's side, and ultimately, the idiot leading the protests earlier also joins them. With the stage set, Akina orders everyone to pack their bags quickly so they can leave in 5 minutes and arrive at the airport before morning. 5 minutes later, when Akina and Takuto lead the survivors toward the cave's exit, Kokon, sensing how smart he is, asks Shizuya to explain how he knows that the monsters will revive and attack again, and Shizuya tells her it's all about correlation. Apparently, the current monsters, which can be considered characters of the MMORPG in the real world, have two absolute strengths. The first is that they can grow steadily using ranks, equipment, and talent. The second, which is the most troublesome part, is the fact that they can revive and continue trying to rank up. When playing the game, a player only needs to clear a dungeon once to advance to the next level, as long as the system doesn't change. As he notices Shizuya spacing out, Takuto asks him why he's so calm, and Shizuya says he's just copying them. Well, Takuto tells him that even though they're trained soldiers, they haven't been trained to fight monsters like that. In other words, they're reaching their limits both physically and mentally. Seeing this, Shizuya asks him why he and Akina are pushing themselves so hard, even when they know that they can't protect everyone there. And Takuto, just as he's about to respond to his question, notices a weird emblem on the wall up front. Spooked, Takuto tells them that there used to be a national emblem and flag there, and then asks them why it's on something like that. When nobody answers him, he talks about the first time he saluted the emblem, and then tells Shizuya to run away with Akina if it comes down to it. Around this same time, Kokon asks what they plan on doing with Kotona-chan, the little girl she was petting earlier, and Takuto tells her Akina won't leave her because her family's dead. This is so because Akina sustained a wound at a young age, which made her unable to bear children, making it understandable as to why she never said yes when Takuto confessed to her. Seconds later, as they continue their journey, a familiar technical arrow shoots past Shizuya and the others and hits little Kotona in the chest. At first, Takuto and the others didn't know what had happened, as they tried to make sure everyone was alright. However, when they all spot Kotona wounded and on the ground, struggling to call Akina's name, Akina loses her shit and snaps yet again. Even when Takuto advises her to get back from danger, Akina charges at the archer, with Shizuya, Kokon, and Takuto chasing after her, and fires several shots at the archer. Considering how proficient the archer is, Shizuya knows that there's no way he'd miss his shot in an unguarded situation. So this means that the enemy's target from the start was Kotona, the weakest link in their formation. With Akina shooting desperately at the archer, who's busy running away, Takuto catches up to the angry lady and urges her to calm down. Just seconds after shooting the stupid archer down, a much larger monster crushes them by stepping on them as they move toward the exit, and Shizuya curses himself for not remembering sooner that the sea golem is an allied unit for the player faction in Azure Land. Turns out that these golems are designed to guard dungeon entrances as NPCs to prevent enemy forces from blocking the gate. Since the service started, however, some players exploited a bug in the hate system and lured enemies to the dungeon's entrance for an easy defeat during boss hunts. Soon after killing poor Takuto and angry Akina, the sea golem raises its huge leg off the pool of blood and lets the archer absorb their essence to get the dungeon reward, Conqueror of the Hidden Cave. At this point, Takuto fully realizes that these monsters only see humans as monsters they have to kill to clear the game, meaning that their rage, hatred, and emotions are merely designed for their entertainment. With that said, Shizuya drops the duffel bag full of broken weapons from the previous victory and activates Omniscience and Omnipotence, ignoring the warnings, to fuse all the broken equipment. Before long, he unlocks a whole bunch of materials and skills, and decides to manipulate the errors occurring in the game to beat the shit out of the archer. In his first attack, Shizuya slices the archer in half with an additional charge attack, and then asks the archer if he can understand the feelings of those left behind. As the archer dies a second time, Shizuya unlocks a bunch more skills, and creates a path for the others to run for safety, while he takes on the missions of Akina and Takuto by facing the sea golem and avenging them. As the golem makes its first attack, Shizuya analyzes it to be a level 40 golem that reduces damage from non-siege types by up to 50%. Normally, he knows he shouldn't fight the giant head-on, but then, given the situation, he knows he needs to buy a little more time to allow the evacuees to escape the golem's wrath. That being said, Shizuya keeps the golem busy by dodging its first attack and shooting rapid mana magic fireballs at the golem's head. Having seen just how effective his speed is against the golem's attacks, Shizuya realizes that he just might be able to defeat the golem in record time. To his dismay, however, after enduring Shizuya's fireball attack, the golem activates a Cyclops laser attack thing called X-Rush from its forehead and redirects it at Shizuya. When he obviously dodges the laser attack, the golem spins its head at an insane speed to make the attack a 360 wide-ranged attack. By this time, Shizuya knows he can't dodge such a devastating attack, so he activates a defensive stance and ultimately gets blown away by the golem's laser attack. Shortly after the attack, Shizuya gets back on his feet, injured, and complains about the slow evacuation of the citizens. Just then, the golem raises both its hands to do a Hulk smash on poor Shizuya, who knows he can neither heal nor dodge, as both will take too much time and strength. With no other options left, Shizuya resigns to fate and accepts the end of his life. Luckily for him, just before the golem smashes him to liquid, Kokon dashes out of the evacuation line, attempting to help Shizuya out, and falls to the ground right beside the golem. Around that same time, the golem's aggro shifts towards Kokon, almost as if it was concerned for her, and Shizuya, who's seen this, pauses to think about the situation. Usually, golems are set up to protect players, so if a golem's aggro shifts at any point, it must mean that there's a player who's dealing damage within its detection range. Despite knowing all this, Shizuya refuses to let the golem attack in the direction of the evacuees, so he activates Blessing of Holy Light to amp up his attack power, and then leaps onto the golem's shoulders for his next attack. Although the golems are tough creatures, Shizuya knows that their weaknesses lie in their energy core, which is usually protected by thick armor. As such, he slams his feet hard on the chest, armor plates, and attacks the surface with everything he's got. The resulting explosion from the attack destroys the golem and injures Shizuya altogether, making poor Kokon fear that the worst has happened. A few hundred feet away from the explosion site, a unique type monster is seen observing the loud blast from a vantage point, and doing nothing to stop or worsen the situation. After watching the world burn and get destroyed by monsters for 72 hours, a special team of crazy good fighters approaches and lands very close to the explosion site on a chopper. Upon alighting the chopper, one of the team members, an orange-haired girl with saw-like teeth, complains of one of the monsters getting taken before their arrival, as her partner, who happens to be a green-haired woman, tells her that the loud bang they heard just now might have been the enemy's self-destruct. The aggressive orange-haired dumbass asks the green-haired woman if she thinks there's anyone else besides them who can corner the monsters. While that might be correct, the green-haired woman tells her there's a possibility that other life forms might have killed each other. Seconds later, the unique type monster that had observed the explosion earlier approaches the ladies calmly. But the orange head, having noticed it to be an elite monster, gets too hasty and attacks it, hoping she'll get entertained by the strong one. While the battle begins, the green-haired one apologizes on behalf of her orange-haired partner, Satsuki, for her brash behavior and decides to join her in the attack as well. Not too long after, the unique monster humbles both of them and leaves right after knocking Satsuki down and holding her partner at knife point. While the top-class monster heads towards Rinkai City, Satsuki gets up and calls the monster out for not dealing the final blow. But the green-haired woman, on the other hand, figures that there might be another big target the monster's hunting down. 24 hours after the golem explosion, Shizuya wakes up in a girl's room, confused, and sits up, only to notice that his right hand, the one that was destroyed in the explosion, is now different from before. Seeing this, Bro figures that the heat from the sea golem's core melted him and triggered his signal trait to absorb the shadow fragments to restructure his destroyed right hand. To confirm this, he checks out the traits of his omniscience and omnipotence skill, and soon realizes that the skill also absorbs boss monster traits and skills. After thinking about several other skill sets peculiar to him, Shizuya snaps out of it and tries to figure out why he's there in the first place. Soon enough, he perceives the aroma of good food and a terrible singing voice, and walks out of the room he's in. When he gets to the kitchen, he spots Kokon awake and cooking up a fried egg for breakfast. While he settles in the dining area to wait for breakfast, Shizuya takes notes of the peaceful lifestyle and makes a few comments on the current state of the city. Before long, Kokone finally serves the terrible breakfast she just made for both of them, and then asks Shizuya to tell her how the food tastes, shortly after taking a bite. At first, Shizuya nervously tells her that the food tastes nice, lying that he doesn't have an appetite, but eventually, Kokone tells him that she knows that the food tastes terrible, so there's no need to be polite. In any case, she does tell him about her stashed food supplies, adding that she went shopping the previous day at a convenience store to stock up, only to have Shizuya force her to drop everything she bought. Amid all her yapping, Shizuya interrupts and asks her if she truly brought him all the way up to her apartment by herself after he passed out. In response, Kokone tells him that she took him down the mountain in a golf cart and dragged his malnourished body up the stairs. When Shizuya asks if she encountered any monsters on her way there, Kokone assures him that she didn't, which is weird. Since he has the time, Shizuya tells Kokone that he barely feels any fear or anxiety from her, almost as if she isn't that worried about getting killed. And he asks her to explain why. By this time, Kokone knows she can't hide her unique trait anymore, so she tells Shizuya that she's definitely tried to force the monsters to attack her the moment they appeared in the real world. But unfortunately, no matter what she does to make them notice her, they just don't attack her. Upon remembering the time she threw rocks and small stones at the monsters, who didn't even notice her, Kokone tells him that they also don't even look at her at all. Now that she thinks about it, she tells Shizuya that maybe he has some kind of superpower, like his right hand. Sensing she might be right, Shizuya asks her if she can see any strange message panels, like they do in a game, and Kokone tells him that she doesn't. Moving on, Shizuya reshapes his right hand into a spiked weapon and tells Kokone that his abilities are connected to a game called Azure Land. Having analyzed his past experiences, Shizuya tells Kokone that the disaster happening in the world at that instant is directly correlated with that stupid game. Despite not knowing much about games, Kokone cracks a weird joke about her superpowers being superior, and Shizuya just ignores her to think about how cooked humanity is at the moment. That being said, Kokone asks him what he plans on doing now, and Shizuya advises that they leave Rinkai quickly and head to Kaijo to meet up with his comrades and confirm their safety. Almost instantly, Kokone tells him she'd like to tag along with him. But before letting her join him, Shizuya lets her know that it's much safer for her if she acts alone, because if she tags along with him, there's a huge chance that she might get caught up in combat. While Kokone admits she can stay alone, she does tell Shizuya that she's confused about her next move. Also, since Shizuya doesn't seem like the type to die so easily, then maybe tagging along with him isn't such a bad idea. Soon after Kokone says all this, there's a brief silence in the room, followed by a weird noise from the entrance door. While Kokone's a bit confused about the whole thing, Shizuya knows someone's trying to pick the lock on the entrance door. So, just to be on the safer side, Shizuya shushes Kokone, who instantly tries to make noise, and tells her to hide, so he can take care of the situation, hoping it's all just a false alarm. Some moments later, Shizuya opens the entrance door after wrapping his right arm in a huge bandage, finds three bozos in hoodies, looking like hungry raccoons, and politely asks them to introduce themselves before letting them in. To avoid spooking Shizuya, one of them apologizes for trying to pick the lock and claims that they didn't think anyone was around, considering the state of the city. Well, for now, Shizuya pretends to understand their situation, and even wastes some time listening to the four-eyed fool among them yap about how they've been running from monsters and made it thus far. After explaining their guts out, the female bozo asks Shizuya if he could let them into the apartment since it's raining outside, and Shizuya lets them in. Once they're all inside, he helps them get a seat and moves to the kitchen, with his right arm still bandaged, to get them some drinks. Along the line, the female bozo asks for the restroom, and Shizuya tells her where to find it. Right after getting them some water, Shizuya sits with both male bozos and politely welcomes them to the apartment. Following the niceties, the four-eyed bozo asks Shizuya about his bandaged right hand, feeling smart, and Shizuya tells him that he fell and injured it the previous month. Satisfied with the lie, the other male bozo asks about the bountiful supplies he seems to have in stock, and Shizuya tells him he's been stocking up online, never thinking it'll actually come in handy this way. To shift the questions toward them, Shizuya asks the guys to explain what they plan to do now that the world is like this, and one of them says they'd like to hide out in a safe place that's full of supplies, like Kokone's apartment. The moment, Shizuya tries politely telling them to F off, seeing as the supplies won't be enough for 4 people in the room. The idiot yapping earlier attacks him with a crowbar, thinking he was just another defenseless survivor. Almost immediately, Shizuya removes the bandages on his right hand, exposing it, and breaks the crowbar with just one hand. Thereafter, the four-eyed bozo takes out his revolver pistol and shoots Shizuya, who dodges the bullet. Soon after dodging the bullet, Shizuya kicks the pistol out of Four Eyes' hands and knocks out the first guy with the crowbar. With the first guy gone, Four Eyes calls Shizuya a monster and then asks if he intentionally took human form to trick them. Well, Shizuya tells them that he is actually a monster, not a defenseless civilian as they think he is. Luckily for Four Eyes, just as Shizuya is about to end him, the female bozo from earlier rushes to the living room, holding Kakone at knife point, and threatens to kill her if Shizuya doesn't stop attacking her allies. Thereafter, she lets him know that she's known from the very beginning that Shizuya wasn't living alone, judging by the looks and feel of the room. By this time, Kokone apologizes for getting caught, but Shizuya blames himself for underestimating the most terrifying existence in this world, where order has collapsed, a creature called a human. In the silence that ensues after Shizuya blames himself, the female bozo thinks about how she perceived the nice smell while searching an empty room earlier, and drew such bad luck, getting entangled with such a strange person like Shizuya. With no time to waste, Shizuya urges the lady to hand Kokone over so he can let her take her companion back. But the idiotic female, who doesn't know that Shizuya's arm is a long-range weapon, tells him to hand over 3 more boxes of supplies before she lets Kakone go. However, before Shizuya can even respond, a spiked monster-like object thrown from the entrance door hits the female bozo in the chest and slowly slices her entire body in half. Very quickly, Shizuya grabs Kakone to protect her and immediately recognizes the sword to be from the unique type noble monster from whom he stole his sword earlier. For some context, it's revealed that whenever a player is killed by a monster, boss, or another player in Azure Land, they enter a hate stock state, where they're given the chance to achieve revenge. If they do eventually achieve revenge, they can retrieve their lost items and return to their former state. Sensing the danger in the situation they're in, Shizuya pushes Kakone away, urging her to run ahead, and then watches the noble monster smash Four Eyes' head to mush with just 1 foot. At this point, Shizuya knows that the noble monster's target is him. So when the monster lunges at him, armed with its sword, Shizuya takes a defensive stance to absorb some of the damage from the monster's strike. Unfortunately for him, his defensive stance wasn't enough to fully block the potency of the monster's attack, because the moment the attack hits him, Shizuya, who's standing in front of the apartment window, gets thrown out of the apartment by the force, and falls several floors down to street level. Luckily for him, he's strong, so before he even hits the ground, he attacks the monster currently charging at him with a rapid mana fire attack. When he does land on the dilapidated street, however, Shizuya runs into an open space in the building near Kakone's apartment, holding his injured right shoulder, and thinks about his first time taking a direct hit from such a powerful enemy. Soon after climbing a few stairs, Shizuya rests at floor 2 Farads, when he's sure he's safe, and activates the blessing of the holy light to heal himself. While the healing ensues, he thinks about the various items he was able to fuse to create a superior preset, and figures that he's nowhere near an elite level monster in terms of physical strength. Before long, the elite monster slowly tracks him up the stairs to his resting place, but the moment Shizuya senses it coming, he attacks the monster with a sweet mana attack. and disappears when he realizes that there's little to no damage being done. Shortly afterward, once the monster continues tracking Shizuya up the flight of stairs, Shizuya fires a technical arrow shot at it. But yet again, the monster easily deflects it. Thereafter, he attacks the monster from behind with his spiked right hand and finally manages to land a decent attack on the monster. Just when he thinks he's finally won, the monster turns around, looking unharmed, and Shizuya keeps on running up the stairs, attacking the monster whenever he can. From his recent failed sneak attack, Shizuya confirms that the enemy information displayed on the map is only in 2D and doesn't account for the Z-axis. As such, rather than escaping far away, the best strategy for him is to use tactics in a narrow place like that, with height differences and limited visibility, to trick and, if possible, kill this POS monster so it doesn't keep coming after him. That being said, Shizuya pours some gas down the stairs and waits for the monster to step on it. The moment that happens, he lights the gas up with a fireball and bombs the monster 3 floors down. In the aftermath of the explosion, Shizuya gets the shock of his life when he spots the noble monster not just unscathed from the fire damage, but also healing from some priest-type magic he recognizes as Saint Breath. By this time, Shizuya figures that there must be other shadows situated around that building, but for now, there's no way for him to confirm that yet. As the pursuit continues up the stairs, Shizuya finally accepts the fact that these bozos are on a completely different level than the ones he fought in the cave. Also, about the incident on the train, Shizuya admits that he only survived because of the skill he knew and the terrain, which was to his advantage. But even now, he knows this bastard won't give him a second chance. As he continues running up the stairs, Shizuya spots some lightning in the sky through one of the windows, and suddenly gets an attack plan to defeat that monster. Around that same time, Kokon comes down from her apartment and searches for Shizuya in the rainy streets, especially after hearing an incredible noise coming from the building. Amid her search, she spots the priest monster right in the middle of the street, extending healing magic toward the building where its master is, and stops to wonder if the priest is an ally of that big monster from before. With no answers in sight, Kokon looks around her to figure out a way she can help Shizuya defeat that priest. Upon looking around for a bit, she spots a jeep behind her, jumps inside, and turns the ignition to bring the jeep to life. Since driving the jeep into the priest won't make them target her, Kokon steps on the pedal and rams the jeep into the priest. About 30 minutes before Kokon even found the jeep, Shizuya, after running up several other floors via the stairs, finally makes it to the roof of the skyscraper building he's on. Seconds later, his pursuer, the elite-level unique-type monster, joins him on the roof, and Shizuya instantly realizes that he's been cornered. With nowhere else to turn to and no options left, Shizuya decides to fight for his survival, and so, when his pursuer charges at him, he attacks it head-on. While Shizuya's battle with the noble commander ensues, an elite support-type archer monster zooms in on Shizuya and targets his bow and arrow at him from another skyscraper building's top. Fortunately for Shizuya, just as the archer's about to unleash its arrow, Satsuki, the orange-haired crazy girl from earlier, shows up on that same building and slams her humongous hammer on the archer. In the aftermath of the hammer attack, the archer gets back on its feet, unscathed, and Satsuki suggests that it put its target aside and fight her. When the archer ignores her yet again, Satsuki gets seriously pissed and attacks it yet again. This time around, rather than engage her, the archer dodges her second attack and escapes the building's rooftop by rappelling down to street level. Around this time, poor Satsuki gets disgusted at the elite creature for not even showing a single shred of fighting spirit, despite getting attacked, and then gets a little jealous of Shizuya, rampaging over at the other building. As Shizuya's battle reaches its climax, Satsuki finds herself questioning who he really is, most especially after seeing his strange right hand, and carefully observes the battle for the next few minutes. Before long, Shizuya baits his attacker into leaning too far forward for a false attack, just so he can get injured and throw the attacker off guard. As soon as the attacker takes the bait, Shizuya gets an injury on the cheek and lands a devastating attack on the attacker's upper torso with his spiked right arm, causing the attacker to bleed profusely from the ghastly wound. Unfortunately, just seconds after he deals the attack, the monster heals from the priest's Saint's Breath healing magic and returns to its original form. At this point, Shizuya knows that if he doesn't sever the link the attacker has with its allies, it'll just keep getting healed, and he'll be the one getting worn down. The moment the monstrous attacker lunges at him a second time, raising its sword for another strike, Shizuya realizes that the link between the attacker and the priest just broke down, meaning that, by some miracle, the priest just got taken down. Confused, Bro scans the street below the building, where the priest is, to see if there are any allies nearby beating the shit out of that annoying priest. And, before long, he spots a familiar jeep near the priest, with Kokon driving it. Around the time Shizuya notices this, Kokon, who's still in the jeep, gets a little excited when the priest doesn't even attack her for ramming it. With this, she restarts the jeep, sets the gear in drive, and proceeds to go in for another ram. Just then, a green arrow flies past the jeep and destroys the priest. And Kokon, surprised, looks behind her to see Satsuki's partner yapping about some civilian fighting back, as well as some other stuff about her mission, and altering support-type elite monsters. As she continues her yap, Shizuya continues dodging and deflecting the monster's attack when he can. Eventually, when the monster does the Leon slash, Shizuya advances to dodge it. However, this time around, the monster kicks his back mid-air, causing Shizuya to cough up some blood, and Shizuya, upon stopping his advance, finally realizes just how dangerous these monster players can be. Naturally, players from Azure Land not only increase their stats as they play the game, but they also increase their playing skills as they fight more battles. This means that the longer the war drags on, the more cooked humanity will be. For now, though, Shizuya decides to keep stalling for time until the conditions for his secret plan are met. Moments later, as the monstrous attacker charges at him a third time, a strong lightning charge from the rainy sky strikes the building's rooftop and ends up frying the monstrous attacker stiff. Right after getting shocked by such a huge electrical voltage, the attacker drops their weapon and falls face first. By this time, Shizuya mocks it for not understanding the stage and rules of the world, and then lets the monster know that lightning is drawn to metal in high places. After showing the monster the lightning rod on the building, Shizuya hops into the electrified rainwater carefully to avoid step voltage generated as a result of the lightning strike, and yaps about his wise plan and Lady Luck's involvement in making it a success. Soon after saying all that, he takes the attacker's weapon and stabs it in the back, killing it instantly. Seconds later, however, Shizuya realizes that the monster's body isn't disappearing at all. But before he's able to do anything about it, the scene shifts to the other building, and we spot Satsuki destroying the wall on the building's rooftop bulkhead she's on, all just to get the archer monster to fight her. The moment the wall on the building's bulkhead room falls apart, the archer shoots an arrow at Satsuki to distract her, and then runs away once she's distracted. Once Satsuki spots the archer running, she tries desperately to get it to come back, but unfortunately, just when she's about to chase the archer, her partner radios in and warns her not to chase the archer too far. When asked why, her partner says it's because the priest she just shot at on the street also retreated, almost as if they received some kind of orders. As Satsuki throws a tantrum, her partner tells her that their boss has ordered them to assemble at base, and since their boss's orders are absolute, they have no choice but to obey them. By that time, Kokone thinks about the differences she's observed between Shizuya and these two hung-up ladies. And also, judging by the way Shizuya talks, Kokone figures he must have other allies elsewhere. For now, though, she decides to figure out Shizuya's situation, and so she runs into the building to investigate, all while failing to spot the weird mechanical bird monster watching over her on the opposite building. A few hours later, a fleet of rescue choppers flies toward Kaiju City to provide backup to the soldiers trapped on the front lines in the city. On their way there, one of the rescue choppers, nicknamed Cat 5, coordinates with HQ, sharing their location longitudes and latitudes, and soon receives fresh orders from HQ to change course immediately to carry out a rescue mission in Rinkai City. Upon receiving the orders, Cat 5 informs HQ that the medical equipment on board their chopper, as well as the carrying capacity, is limited, making carrying a large number of injured persons almost impossible. As the pilot requests backup from the other units, HQ lets them know that their rescue targets are one male and one female, making them just 2 persons in total. Before accepting the new orders, Cat 5 asks HQ if the distress signal was transmitted by Unit BY-183, which is Akina and Takudo's unit, but HQ ignores their question and proceeds to do their thing. At this point, Cat 5 keeps flying till it arrives in Rinkai City and lands somewhere in the debris, near Shizuya and Kokon. The moment Shizuya and Kokon make a move to get inside the chopper, the pilot, who's shocked to see them, asks them to identify themselves, adding that he'd assumed that the male and female personnel were supposed to be military. While entering the chopper with his right hand exposed, Shizuya tells the pilot that Takudo and Akina accepted a refugee rescue mission, and were Kea after they gave him the radio he used to make the distress call to HQ. Satisfied by Shizuya's explanation, the pilot takes off once both Kokon and Shizuya are in the chopper, and continues telling them all the bad news he's been receiving ever since the monsters invaded the world. After all the niceties, the pilot moves on to tell Shizuya that they took an urgent mission to come help them, and since they have another assignment, they'll just have to drop them off at the nearest shelter. Hearing this, Shizuya asks the pilot to tell him where they're headed, and the pilot, realizing that his next destination isn't classified, tells Shizuya that they're headed to Kaiju City, the city on the front lines of the war against the shadow monsters. Surprised to hear the pilot call the monsters by a more befitting name, Shizuya wonders if there is someone else besides him who can see information on monsters. On the other hand, since he can't really know for sure, he ignores the thought and asks the pilot if he can take them along with him to Kaiju City. In response, the pilot warns Shizuya about the dangers of going to the front lines with almost no combat experience, and then lets him know that there's a very high chance that he might die in the city if he eventually gets there. When Shizuya refuses to back down, the pilot asks him why he's so keen on going to Kaiju City, and Shizuya says it's because he has important friends in the city. Following this, he also promises never to interfere with the pilot's operation in the city once they get there, citing that he can protect himself. And the pilot, satisfied by his response, decides to fly him there since he looks strong enough. Shortly after settling things with the pilot, Kakone teases Shizuya, asking if his important friend is a girl, and Shizuya tells her that although the one who lives in Kaiju City is a woman, there are also others heading there too. That being said, he asks Kokone if she has an issue with him meeting with a woman, and Kokone says she's just envious because she doesn't have that many friends. Moving on, she stretches, all while complaining about the propeller making her sleepy, and then leans in on Shizuya's shoulder to take a nap for the rest of the flight. After which, Shizuya also does the same. By evening time, Shizuya wakes up to the unfamiliar, eerie sounds of battle, with machine gun sounds, AR, and explosions rocking the very core of Kaiju City, as military personnel do their very best to take down these shadow monsters. Seconds later, the pilot radios in his arrival on the front lines to HQ and aggressively flies his chopper, while Shizuya stands at the edge of the chopper to observe the current tide of battle. Judging by how chaotic the entire scenery is, Shizuya undoubtedly realizes that humanity is at war with the shadow monsters, and so he continues observing. Soon after, watching the bombers bomb the heck out of one of the shadow mages, who just killed off a whole bunch of soldiers with one spell, Shizuya watches from the chopper as one of the dragon-like flying shadow monsters latches onto another attack chopper and destroys it in an instant. The moment the other pilots realize that the signal vanished in an instant, one of the monsters is seen in another scene moving what seems to be chess pieces across a chessboard, and ultimately ends up summoning a giant shadow monster to destroy humanity's forces with only a few attacks. As the giant's rampage over the city begins, Shizuya reveals that there's one more hidden reason he's going to Kaiju City, a reason that he hasn't told anyone yet. If, peradventure, the reality of the world is the same as the game world, then the fortress that players in Azure Land should attack first is the room tower in the big rank battlefield, aka a C-zone. That being said, Shizuya and Kakone continue trying to get a safe landing spot for the chopper, while the pilot, who still struggles to navigate his way through the heat and chaos, he complains over how useless the army's modern warfare weapons are against these shadow monsters. Seconds after complaining, he tries shooting down a flying shadow monster with his chopper's machine guns. But just then, he realizes very quickly that the fire control radar isn't working properly, and tells Shizuya about their problem. Hearing this, Shizuya advises the pilot to aim manually, since the malfunction is probably the effect of a barrier, and the pilot takes his advice. As he aims at the flying monsters, Shizuya accepts the fact that modern warfare relies heavily on information as a potent weapon, and also concludes that, as of now, information is useless against an enemy who knows all their tactics and countermeasures. Sensing the danger coming, he turns to Kakone, asks if she can whistle, and pushes her out of the chopper when she tells him that she can. Just seconds after letting Kakone out of the chopper, a flying monster attacks their chopper, threatening to crash it, and Shizuya instantly attacks it to protect the chopper and the pilots. Having seen just how strong Shizuya is against the monsters, the pilot stares at him, speechless, but then Shizuya, knowing that there's no time to waste, urges the pilot to fly his chopper out of the damage range. Thereafter, he activates Brave Flag and Powerful Attack, and slams a heavy attack on the flying Griffon-like shadow monster mid-air. As Shizuya and the Griffon shadow monster fall to their death, the other choppers fire several missiles at them, but then, Shizuya, knowing that he can't change the tide of battle by himself, realizes he needs to get to the ground first before doing anything. Sadly, as he braces himself for a rough landing, the other choppers fire even more missiles at him, forcing him to dodge them, and soon enough, other Griffon shadow monsters cluster all around Shizuya to crush him. Luckily for him, just as Shizuya fights his way out of the clusterfuck, Kokone shockingly catches him midair and pulls him on the back of the smaller Griffon monster she's currently riding. Once he's safely on the back of the Griffon, Shizuya asks why she came back, and she tells him that she did it to save him. Following this, she calls him out for pushing her out of the chopper without uttering a word, which was surprising, and then adds that she finally understood the reason why he needed her whistle mid-fall. As it turns out, seconds after falling off the chopper, Kokon whistled and called up the little griffin shadow monster that's currently helping them. Not too long after, Shizuya joins her on the griffin's back. However, the griffin starts behaving erratically, and Shizuya tells Kokon that it's probably acting like that because it doesn't consider him an ally. For some context, it's then revealed that a griffon is a monster possessing order and virtue attributes, as well as a trait called Bond of Wisdom, which makes it instinctively help players falling from the sky. Before long, Kokon's griffon intentionally crashes into a skyscraper with Shizuya and Kokon on its back, and Shizuya, upon surviving the crash, reshapes his right hand to destroy the griffin to avoid further destruction. Seeing this, Kokon stops and begs him to let her talk to it first, and Shizuya lets her do her thing. Once she gets back on the griffon's back, alongside Shizuya, Kokon comforts the griffon, assuring it that Shizuya is an ally who won't hurt it, and then urges the griffin to slowly let them down to street level safely. As the monster obeys Kokone's order, a shocked Shizuya slowly realizes that he's never met a player who can communicate with a monster in that manner before. Usually, to players, enemies are just numbers that drop XP and loot, because nobody ever thinks of interacting with monsters in a game. However, to even think that an irregular like Kokon would even pull something like that off, Shizuya figures she might be an even more unique existence than he is. That being said, Shizuya snaps out of his soliloquy, and the griffon drops both of them in a river before flying away after Kokon thanks it for the help. Shortly afterward, as both of them navigate their way to the riverbank, Kokon asks Shizuya why he's suddenly become so quiet, and he just lies and tells her it's nothing. Soon enough, they walk out of the river with wet clothes and set up a fire to warm themselves up. About 30 minutes after getting dropped, Kokon asks Shizuya, while drying her hair by the fire, what he plans on doing now, and Shizuya tells her that at first glance, he never expected the situation with Kaiju City to get that bad. For starters, the Shadow's advance has spread as far as the Koto district, which is bad in itself, and this puts his friends at an even greater risk than he initially thought. The moment Kokon asks if he knows where his friends are, Shizuya gets up to look for them, but then she warns him not to go out alone because it's going to be pretty dangerous for him. By this time, Shizuya tells her that he can't turn a blind eye when his friends are in danger, and Kokon, irritated by his stubbornness, complains a little bit. Seconds later, when she tells Shizuya that she has a plan, Shizuya asks if she'll also come along with him, and Kokon tells him it's only logical she does, since the shadows don't attack her anyway. While Shizuya tries to warn her not to rely on her trait too much, Kokone shuts him up and urges him to describe his buddies so they can split up and search for them. After a brief silence, Shizuya talks about their last offline meeting, which was 2 years ago, and then pulls up a photo of himself and his friend group from that time. As she stares at the photo, Kokone teases him for striking a pose, and then turns her attention to the girl sitting next to him in the photo, Hien Hitomi. Seeing the aura around her, she asks if Hien Hitomi is from some wealthy family, and Shizuya tells her that even though he doesn't know what her life is like in the real world, he does know that she's not the same person Kokone thinks she is. Having said all that, Kokone pretends to understand his position and promises to find her for Shizuya. At this point, Shizuya takes out his phone to tell her about the meeting places he's jotted down, but Kokone yanks his phone from him, pushes him out of the way, and calls her griffin to come pick her up. As Shizuya watches Kokone leave on the griffin, he complains a little and then reveals that he intends to let her go because he can't risk involving her in his plan from then on. That being said, Shizuya returns to recon duty and spends the entire night searching for clues. The following morning, Shadow Monster reinforcements march towards Kaiju City, holding up flags and mounting horrifying zombie horses with red eyes, and slowly approach the rear of humanity's forces. Moments before they arrive, however, one of the human soldiers, phones, all snipers, informs them that the enemy's main force is cavalry and archers, so they shouldn't fight them in the open, and then urges them to draw the monsters to the park instead. Around that same time, Shizuya, who's nearby, spots a shadow monster planning a sneak attack on a human sniper who currently has his scope on one of the elite level support type monster priests, healing the monster's main forces on the battlefield. Luckily for the sniper, just as the shadow monster is about to kill him, Shizuya exposes himself and kicks the shadow attacker away from the sniper. As the sniper notices the hubbub behind his back, Shizuya takes out his military grade pistol and fires several shots into the monster's body, killing it in the process. Upon realizing that this strange person with a weird right hand just saved him, the sniper thanks Shizuya and then asks what unit he's from. Ignoring the question, Shizuya asks the dude to tell him where the nearest command post is located, and the sniper describes the place to him. Soon after listening to the description, Shizuya realizes that the location is exactly like the key point in the game, aka the Nest Core. He feels that if he can make it there, then he can meet the core forces of humanity once and for all. With this, Shizuya instantly dashes toward the Kaiju City subway station, right after making sure to keep his right hand hidden just to be on the safer side for now, and leaves humanity's main forces behind. Minutes later, Shizuya finds himself in an empty subway waiting area, so he casually walks around to get a feel of the place. Since humanity still controls that part of the city, Shizuya figures the subway should still be fully operational, he just has to look hard enough. At one point in his tour, however, he gets so distracted that he doesn't notice the thin laser light lines crossing his path. Once his right hand touches the laser lines, the subway ceiling beams to life with several automatic machine guns, and before Shizuya can even do anything about them, they rain down heavy bullets on him. With no time to waste, Shizuya instantly creates a defensive shield using his right hand's power, but the moment the guns stop firing, he destroys them all with a rapid mana cannon. As soon as he's done destroying the ceiling machine guns, Shizuya yet again finds himself facing dozens of soldiers up front, with all their assault rifles carefully pointed at him and threatening to fire at will. To avoid unnecessary bloodshed, Shizuya raises his hands and lets them know that he's a human just like them. But, to his dismay, one of the soldiers not only spots his right hand but also asks his colleagues why Shizuya triggered the Shadow exclusive alarm in the first place. While they try to find answers, Shizuya gets the shock of his life when he hears the word Shadow exclusive alarm because, if this soldier's in his right state of mind, then it must mean that a select group of humans must have known about the Shadow's existence way before they appeared a few days ago as mysterious life forms. Having realized that there's so much more that he doesn't know, Shizuya promises them that he's a human being, and then slowly proceeds toward them to prove his humanity. When the soldiers order him to get back, Shizuya notices some monsters approaching the soldiers via the entrance he just took, and realizes that he's in a very bad situation. Before long, the soldiers shoot at him and the arriving monsters, but Shizuya dodges all the bullets and escapes to the side of the railway track, knowing fully well that the place won't hold out much longer. As the soldiers hold the monsters off, Shizuya hops off the safety railings and waits for a train to zoom past him. Seconds later, when the first train zooms past the railway, Shizuya jumps on top of it and hitches a ride to his next destination. A few minutes later, as he approaches another checkpoint, the soldiers get alerted by Control to be ready to intercept an unknown signal rapidly approaching the command post, along with the subway intercept. By the time Shizuya gets to the next checkpoint, he finds several dozen soldiers already waiting with their ARs aimed at him, and dodges and blocks the best he can when they begin firing at him. Eventually, even the almighty Shizuya gets to feel the effect of a power surpassing the shadow power in his right arm, so he jumps off the train right before it zooms past that checkpoint, and figures he needs to de-escalate the situation to talk things through. However, while he takes cover behind a pillar, with bullets flying everywhere, Shizuya knows it'll be difficult to navigate the situation without hurting anyone. Thankfully, before any blood is shed, a boss-level personnel member ceases fire and informs everyone that there's been a malfunction in the alarm system. As such, Shizuya isn't a shadow, but their ally. As the man's face appears clearer in the light, Shizuya stares at his face and instantly recognizes him. A few hours later, the blonde boss dude takes Shizuya to the Kaiju Station Frontline Provisional HQ to meet with the other big players in the game and discuss with them. While they stroll along the military base on the HQ grounds, the blonde boss calls Shizuya, who's walking right behind him, and asks him if he'd have killed those soldiers if he hadn't shown up. In response, Shizuya tells him he only came to ask for his cooperation, all while trying to figure out where he's seen the blonde boss before. Realizing that Shizuya is trying to avoid the question, the blonde boss continues teasing him for wanting to kill the soldiers for real. But when Shizuya keeps ignoring him, he moves on to tell him that people at war won't go easy on him, even if he treats them kindly. Around that same time, an elderly man, who looks military, in a long brown trench coat, guarded by soldiers, shows up and asks the blonde boss guy, whom he calls Williams, if something's happened again. With no response given, the elderly man notices Shizuya and asks William if he's a fellow otaku. And William, right after telling the elderly man that he's just seeing Shizuya for the first time, adds that he didn't catch his signal because of some issues, and whatnot. Having heard everything, the elderly man in glasses asks Williams if Shizuya's an oath keeper, but William ends up teasing the man for getting too used to the game-like names. Shortly after all the niceties, the elderly man reminds Williams that there's a meeting being held in an hour, which requires the representative of the SEAM group to attend, and Williams asks how many of them are allowed to attend. When the elderly man tells him he can bring his new friend along, Williams takes Shizuya to his private quarters and urges him to take a bath so he can change into more official clothes for the meeting with the top military brass. Before getting to that, however, Shizuya pauses and insinuates to Williams that he wants to exchange information first, to which he also agrees. From what he's noticed, Shizuya knows that the SEAM group ranks 5th globally among international organizations and was founded 200 years ago. Currently, their business spans electronics, finance, science, machines, and other research fields as well. Not too long ago, they created the VR MMORPG game, Azure Land. But right now, even he realizes that there's very little he knows about them. To begin his interrogation, Shizuya asks William to tell him what he knows about the SEAM group, and William tells him that while he doesn't know much, he does know that the shadows appeared out of nowhere, putting the whole world in chaos, and making it almost impossible to figure out what's happening in their subsidiaries. While Shizuya undresses in the bathroom, he continues his interrogation by asking William if he thought he was one of them and came after him. Although William admits that he did think he was one of them at first, he now knows that the opposite is the case, because the background checks he's run so far make it possible for him to register Shizuya as one of them. That being said, Shizuya asks the guy why there's already a shadow defense system in place when it's only been a week since the shadows invaded Earth. And Williams starts his response by talking about game beta testing. Even though it's only been 5 days since the shadows broke in, Williams says that Overwrite was already running from 2 weeks ago. Apparently, the test, Overwrite, was done secretly in a place with no people, and once SEAM understood the dexterity of the situation, they distributed the information to the other international organizations and institutions. When Shizuya confronts Williams for not distributing the information to the general public, Williams says they couldn't risk causing mass hysteria, and Shizuya stays silent in the shower thereafter to ponder on the things he's learned so far. Given the fact that the enemies were named by someone like William, SEAM's young master, Shizuya figures that people with influence or power might have noticed a link between Azure Land and Shadow beforehand. Also, considering just how untrustworthy the military sees SEAM, Shizuya knows that things are much more complicated than William sees them. With this, he tells him about the eventual confusion their hesitation to dissipate information caused to the general public, and William, accepting the blame, tells Shizuya that even though they knew about the enemy's existence beforehand, as well as their traits, they still didn't know when they would attack or what tactics they would use. Around this same time, Shizuya, who's now done showering, dresses up, opens the bathroom door, and then asks William if everything he's discussed so far is all a sign of the Oath Keeper that the elderly man was talking about. In response, William tells him yes, and then urges him to think of it as a temporary task force formed to analyze the shadows. Also, since the task force is still in its early stages, he advises Shizuya not to think they're as skilled as he was in the subway. That being said, Shizuya lets William know that he'll be wearing the same clothes he had on when he arrived, and William assures him that it's not a problem. Having divulged all he can about the SEAM group, William tells Shizuya to tell him the truth, or else he won't be able to explain his right hand to the military. Well, Shizuya lets him know that he doesn't know much about the right hand, which seems to be connected to Azure Land, and then adds that it probably changed when he touched the Shadow's Signal Energy armor circuits. After seeing Shizuya reshape the hand into a spiked weapon, William fanboys a little and yaps about the Shadow technology and powers, touching the weapon to get a feel of it when he can. Not too long after, his smartwatch beeps to life to remind him of the meeting that's happening soon, so William bids Shizuya farewell and leaves the room to talk to some stubborn old folks. Shortly after, watching him leave, Shizuya ponders the information he's gathered on William so far. Apparently, the man is a prodigy who inherited the blood of conglomerates from the East and the West, and rose to power to control SEAM Group at such a young age with his unmatched skill. If anything, Shizuya knows that the bastard knows a thing or two about Azure Land's developers, and so for now, he needs to keep his guard up when dealing with William at all times.